Hello and welcome to my channel. Thank you for tuning in today. It is a rainy day outside and I had a minute, so I wanted to just jump on. I do apologize if my voice is a bit croaky. I have just woken up and something has been on my mind that I wanted to share with you. I don't often do movie reviews. I do them really kind of from time to time when I feel inspired or when I feel called to talk about a piece of cinema. And I think I just wanted to talk about this film that I recently saw. I know it's been doing the rounds, it's got a lot of buzz around it, and really rightly so. It really is, I would say, probably an instant cult classic body horror film, which is really layered beautifully with a lot of metaphors, symbolisms, story, plot twists that really is really gruesome, but yet very psychologically real and true. And so I think that the absurdity of this film is so disgusting and visceral that it really needed to be to convey the message that it really conveys. So the film is called The Substance and it's unbelievable. I think it's really, really well done and is just so clever. Very, very rarely films come along that are just so the craft of making a film like this and the acting and all of the shots, the sound effects of this film were just on point. It's just it's perfect, for what it really is. So I just wanted to share something about this film and kind of unpack it a little bit. So if you haven't seen the film, then this is not the video for you. Please go watch the film, come back and let me know what you think about this film. So there will be spoilers. I'm going to kind of unpack scenes and kind of give you my overall thoughts on the film. Very rarely do actors really go to this level of vulnerability and in showing nudity and just showing a real letting themselves be so deformed on, in a film. It really is a really analytical film as well. So there's so many different perspectives, and I've been researching and looking into a lot of the quotes that Coralie Falchi, I think it is Coralie, the director, has talked about, and really been quite interested in the messages that this film projects. So let's get into it. So just summarizing it here, we see a woman that in her first shot is, her name is Elizabeth Sparkle, and the start of the film is showing the Hollywood Walk of Fame. We are introduced to this character that we see through a star that is created. She was once a Oscar-winning actress, so she's got her star on the street. And it's also interesting to see how, the shot is like people over time value people that are current or in, and then as time goes by, people are not familiar with that star or that person, that actor, and it's just another kind of, star on the side of the road. It ages, people drop food over it, it's cracked, it's stained, it's disrespected, and it's kind of not acknowledged as years go by. And it's really kind of symbolic of, the business of being a star or being in the spotlight. I think the film choice for names is very well done. Elizabeth, the name of the star, played by Demi Moore, she has aged and is now in her 50s. And she was once, a very successful actress that is now kind of doing, we see her doing it's a workout show where she has to, she does this instruction workout TV show where we see her walking out and, walking down the hall. It's her birthday, and it's like, yet again, she is being reminded of being in an industry, and it's not necessarily even that she's in the entertainment industry. This happens in many industries, is that people just get faded out when they get old, and new young people kind of come through and replace them. And her character is reminded of all of the, the photos on the wall of what she looked like in the past. So she's kind of like inevitably getting older. And it really highlights that, really, really well. Also, back to the name of Elizabeth, I think it's like a very old Hollywood name. It's like an old Hollywood beauty. That type of name really suits the character as like a movie actress that is now resorted to doing workout TV to try and stay relevant, to try and stay young. So we get this idea that this woman is in like fundamentally what the film is about, and it does it in such a really direct way, is that she is in a war with herself. She's in a war with her older self, becoming something she doesn't want to be, how society sees her as valuable, and then at war with her younger version of herself, which she can't get back as she's kind of declining. And so she goes into the toilets, just fast forwarding here, and she is basically overhears her cast, her director, her producer. By the way, men are portrayed very abhorrently in this film, very kind of crude and patriotic and kind of disgusting, like the way that they see women as replaceable. And one of the things that he says, the director comes in and he kind of takes a piss while she goes into the toilet, and she overhears him say, women, kind of hit the wall at 25. And he's basically saying that she's being cancelled, that the show that she's in is being cancelled. So she is like now realizing that she's being replaced because she's too old. And he's going to start opening a casting call for a younger replacement for her. And so she comes out of the toilets, and it's the first time that we see Elizabeth really look at herself in a way that is like terrible. Like she feels absolutely terrible, and is really looking at herself in this judgmental way. And I think that we all do that as a society. People do that. Women especially do that. Women are kind of conditioned to, how pretty they are, how happy they appear. And that's one of the lines later in the show, is that pretty girls should always smile. And it's this idea that we want someone that looks happy and young and bouncy and perfect. And of course, when you get old, you're cast aside because your value decreases. I have talked about this previously in other videos. One of them is called sexual marketplace value, which I openly talk about that and explain it to. So if you'd like to go through my videos, you can go back and re-listen to that podcast. It's pretty hardcore to hear, but it's unfortunate that that's the world that we are in, and it's very savage. Next scene we see Demi Moore. She is like sitting with this producer. I love that the name of the producer is called Harvey. I think it's kind of obviously a play to, Harvey Weinstein. And he's just kind of eating shrimp, and it's like the sound effects of that are just like so like crude and messy, and like she's sitting there at the table with him in this restaurant, and she's not eating anything, and he's just telling her how she's getting kind of that thing, that thing, she's getting older, but he's just kind of telling her in this like in a very satirical way, like it's kind of almost cartoony, but is telling her in this industry, things come and go, and then you get to this age, and then you kind of, out. And she's kind of baiting him like, what? Tell me what? What do you mean? And it really is interesting because it highlights the effects of how men can get away with this level of like behavior where they get to be the pig, they get to eat whatever they want. She can't. She's got to be this kind of young doll. So we see this version of projection with women, where women aren't supposed to eat anything. They're supposed to be small and petite and little and do what they're told. And that's kind of the dominating force of like Hollywood, is that they all have to have a certain look. They have to have a certain thing about them in the entertainment industry, and other people base how they see themselves off other people. That's really interesting. I'm trying to condense this into like something that you guys, if you haven't seen the film, it's my projection of it. So basically, yeah, it shows her just kind of being in this place where she's really depressed, and she just goes in the home and looks in the mirror, and she's looking in the bathroom mirror. The bathroom mirror and the bathroom are very clinically cold, and we see the styling of the bathroom is very symbolic of like a cocoon or something that is very sterile, that doesn't have any furniture, and just really shows the biology of her and what happens next. So in this, she is having a bad time, and basically, I think it was either the night before, she was driving home and sees a billboard of her being ripped down, and it's really kind of like one kick after the other, and there's a little bit of like satire in this film. Like, it doesn't necessarily take itself too seriously in terms of its direction. It's definitely brutal and visceral, and I think that it needs to be. So Elizabeth is in a car crash, and she ends up going to hospital. The doctors say, look, there's nothing broken. But while she's there, she meets a young, very handsome guy who gives her this USB stick and kind of writes saying, it changed my life. And it's a reference to what the title of the film is called, which is called The Substance. And so it's he sees her as like a potential candidate for this procedure that could be done. And so she goes home and puts the USB stick in the side of her TV and sees this, this projection of this package or this procedure, where it's like enticing her to become or to create a younger, more beautiful, more popular version of herself. And so it's like pretty horrific, but it's, obviously something that she considers. She throws it in the bin, and then she's like, no, I can't do it, takes it back out. But what it all comes down to, the brutality of this film, is that she is prepared to actually inject this fucking green shit into herself. And everything is screaming, don't do this. But she gets to such a low point in herself. It's so gruesome to watch. And it's a pretty gnarly scene where she basically goes into the bathroom and is like reached a point now where she's willing to try anything, which is really symbolic. Like, the substance is so symbolic and so many, like, on so many levels. One, it could be the substance is how we abuse the substance, which could be like drugs or alcohol, trying to escape something that we don't like about ourselves or we don't like about our world. Also, the substance could be like a metaphor for all of the procedures that are out there that people undergo. There's so many now, or, any level of editing that can go too far, with makeup and, Ozempic crazes and things like that. The substance is really a reference point or a metaphor for the changes that we do to ourselves that are violent on ourselves. And the substance is a metaphor for the violence that we put our soul through and the ugliness that we create within ourselves by not being happy with who we are and living in a world that really promotes self-hate from birth. So that way we're always a consumer if we're consuming more things to try and make ourselves feel better and feel prettier so that others will receive us. So it's like very psychological when you look at it that in that way. And so she realizes she can't escape who she is, and she wants this change. She wants this kind of, rebirth of sorts, or she wants to take the risk. So anyway, I'm kind of summarizing here quite a lot, but basically she agrees to do it and gets an address, goes to the, I'm skipping here a little bit, sorry. She goes and gets this, this mystery substance from this fucking locker room that's like very like Amazon, which I thought was very cool. Good reference point to Amazon. And she goes to this underground back, warehouse type space, goes in there and gets it, comes home and is ready to do, give it a try. And so it's like, oh my God. It's pretty brutal. So she injects this green shit into herself, which is called the activator, which is something that basically activates the whole procedure of the substance. They call it the experience. And of course, it creates a split within her on a cellular level. And so it starts to take root in her. She injects it into her arm and falls on the ground, and basically from her spine, ripping out of her back, is a new version of her, which is everything that she wishes she could be. Something that's very interesting about this, actually, which I love, is that we are not shown as an audience whether they share a consciousness. And I think that they do, because there's a scene where she drinks or she takes the substance, and it's like she goes through a tunnel with like lights and stuff. And then we see this symbolic fire heart, which is indicating that there is some level of shift from Elizabeth into the new version of her that she's created, which is called Sue. So it's really interesting that there's a play on, or it's like implying that although there is a split between the two of these new characters, or between the two characters, it's like Sue and Elizabeth share the same consciousness because they are one person. So everything that Sue would do, Elizabeth would do, because they are one. And that's one of the key points in the film that keeps being referenced, is that you are one. So Elizabeth is called the Matrix in this kind of experiment, where she is the one that creates the spawn or the cell clone of herself. And then Sue is the younger version of what Elizabeth would do in the current day and age that she's in now. So it's really quite interesting. It's so dark. Of course, we see Sue's reaction to looking at the version of her that she just came out of with such kind of curiosity and disdain. And so basically the procedure is they have to split and share 7 days each. So Sue gets 7 days, and then she has to go lay on the floor in this cold bathroom and have this feeder, the feed going through her on a drip, and then the other one swaps. So it's 7 days on, 7 days off. Elizabeth gets 7 days, Sue gets 7 days. And that's the premises of this whole shift, is that the younger Sue version of Elizabeth goes straight out into the world and kind of does this rebirth, which is really spiritually interesting, because Sue doesn't want to be an actress. She doesn't go back to what Elizabeth was. She goes back to being where Elizabeth was, where she left off. So she goes and auditions for the show as a new version, a younger version of herself on the show that she was before running. So she goes to the audition of her former role as a fitness instructor, and it's hyper sexual as well, which also plays on how sex sells and that type of thing. The baby doll, a lot of Sue's aesthetic is very like I'd say probably like 80s or 70s kind of fitness pin-up girl model. Kind of like everything that she does is like a bubblegum version of Americana. The way that she takes the Diet Coke out of the fridge and we see her pink lips drinking it. It's this sparkly, magical, hypersexual, hyper pretty kind of embodiment if that makes sense. And so that's really where it is. It kind of, this is where the film starts to really take shape, where we get to see what Sue does with those 7 days and where she takes it. And eventually it evolves into this kind of imperfection thing where like it's never enough. Like she sees herself as never enough, and that her old physical version of herself is like something that she should abandon. And it's kind of like a split personality, which is really interesting because spiritually looking at this, you know that you can't win a battle with yourself because you are both sides. And so that's where this film gets really interesting in its dichotomy, because it's showing the switch between the younger version and the older version, and the hatred towards the younger self, towards the older self, because Sue sees Elizabeth as something to be gotten rid of. She sees her as like pathetic. So when she switches into her body, she comes out into the living room because they still share the same apartment space. So she sees like that Elizabeth, just watched TV all day or didn't really leave the house much. And so she sees that as repulsive. And it's so interesting that the more that Elizabeth does the switches, she gets more lonely, and it only increases more self-hatred because she wishes she could be Sue. Although she is Sue, and on some level it's implied that they do share the memories of what each other is switching to and from the younger self to the older self. So what they have to do is they have to exchange spinal fluid in shots. This is called a stabilizer. And so what they have to do is during the 7 days, every day, they have to take out spinal fluid from the matrix, which was from Elizabeth's body on the ground, to sustain Sue, which is pretty fucked up because that's how the clone kind of keeps going. So there's this like real internalized violence that's, I just can't, like, I'm trying to explain it in this like podcast, is that it's really about how the two of them go from separating themselves as far as they can from each other. And so it kind of becomes like a tug of war of power and abuse. And so at one point, Sue takes over, takes more spinal fluid from Elizabeth, and then she like tries to extend her time more than 7 days. And so when Demi Moore's character wakes up and she's calling the substance, hotline, saying I want to report a misuse of the substance, the phone guy on the other end of the phone's like, there's no going back. Like, what you take from the other side is lost, because she wakes up and her hand or her finger is all aged, so it's distorting her. So what Sue takes from her more over in the spinal fluid is literally sucking the life out of the host, which is Elizabeth, Demi Moore's character. It's really interesting. And of course, the best line in this film, other than Pretty Girl Should Always Smile, was when the guy on the phone says to Elizabeth, you have to respect the balance. You have to respect, like, you won't have any misuses of the substance, because the substance is only a metaphor for the self-hate that you already had. So your misuse of something that's going to make it better is only on you. So if you take something from the other person on the other side, they can't get that back. And if you do that to them and they do that to you, it works both ways. So Demi Moore's starting to realize, oh shit, what have I done? And so the guy on the phone says, this is where it's at. And so she hangs up the phone. And of course, I'm just going to fast forward this a lot, but basically we get this switching of 7 days. And of course, the younger version, Sue, starts to really abuse her power. She abuses her influence. It's also interesting how we see how Sue is respected and liked more instantly than Elizabeth's character. And one of the things that Sue does is she puts her away in the back of a bathroom. She opens a room that's kind of dark, and puts Elizabeth in there because she doesn't want to see the thing that reminds her of the parts of herself that she doesn't like, which is also very, very symbolic of how we don't want to look at or face the ugliness within us. We kind of push it away to the back. I'm just going to make a cup of tea and I'll keep going with this review. I hope that you're enjoying. I hope that you're enjoying. Okay, I'm back. A cup of tea made. So I'm going to continue talking about the film The Substance, Elizabeth, Demi Moore's character, and of course the beautiful little Sue. It's so good. It's so good. Anyway, so what I was saying was basically it kind of becomes this thing where it's a tug of war between one sabotaging the other, and kind of in a very kind of dark comical way. So Demi Moore's character, as she's being more, as she's being more used, she's aging terribly. We see her kind of legs are all deformed, aged. It's sucking the life out of her. And so she starts to sabotage and becomes hateful and resentful of Sue. So it's kind of almost like a mother-daughter relationship play that could be here as well, where it's the vanity of a mother hating on her daughter for ruining her body, for giving her life. By the way, I've actually seen this, not uncommon, amongst narcissistic mothers. Or it could be the reverse, where it's like this narcissistic child that is ungrateful and likes to stay up and play too long and party too long and abuses her power, and has like a disdain and sees someone as aging as something that should be gotten rid of, which, by the way, is also what Elizabeth would do because she is Elizabeth. And that's part of the interesting dichotomy of it's like the twins of themselves, is that how the older one treats the younger one is true, and how the younger one treats the older one version of herself is also true. It's so interesting. Just on a side note, I do remember watching a film, if you remember a film that came out in the early 2000s, and it was one of those really cool clone films, and it was called The Fifth Day. I'm not sure if you guys know that film, but it had a very, very interesting scene which really haunted me, and I felt it was very kind of symbolic on a like occult kind of spiritual level when we talk about this type of subject matter, is like in terms of cloning or splitting of the atoms or splitting of ourselves, which where at the end of the film, this evil, villain character, he sees a version of himself that he once was because he's being cloned, because he's cloned himself, and treats himself terribly. And the older version, the true, the version that made him says, "Why are you doing this? What are you doing?" And the clone says back to him, "I'm you. I'm doing what you would do." Which is so interesting because it's so true. It doesn't matter if you hate yourself and if you're a horrible person, what makes you think that if you cloned yourself that the other version of you wouldn't still be a horrible person, because it's based off you. So it's like, of course they're going to discard you and use you and see you as something to be gotten rid of, because that's how a narcissist would think. Because only a narcissist would actually want to have immortality or want to clone themselves. So that's why I find this film so interesting, because even though we know that Elizabeth should never have taken this green shit and done this fucking wild, crazy ass experiment, it's only bringing forth who she is the whole time and how much violence and self-hatred she had for herself. So it's kind of like a Black Mirror episode on steroids. If you've seen the movie, seen the show Black Mirror, you'll know what I'm talking about. Very dystopian future timelines, like social crediting and stuff like that. So yeah, I just happen to like that it's just done so well. So in this film, back to the film, one of the things Elizabeth does is she does this cook up where she like cooks all this food and like one of the things is when they do the switch over is that Sue has to like extract a chicken drumstick out of the side of her ass and like pull it out of like her belly button, which is just like so grotesque. But it's the sabotage from her other self that did it to her to try and get back at her. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. And it's so interesting when Elizabeth has to see Sue living the life that she once had on TV and kind of mocking her and doing all this really overdone, you know, very stylized montage of Elizabeth's character cooking up all this food in the kitchen from this cookbook that Harvey, her former producer, gave her as an exit gift. And she's like cooking and she's got hair, like scaly skin, swollen, hunchback, very brittle bones because she's been so used by Sue, and it's her way of getting revenge. Yeah, look, I'm just going to keep going a little bit more with this, and then I'm going to say, look, just I haven't seen this film. It's psychologically really fucking so interesting. I know I say that a lot, but in terms of filmmaking and stylizing and the mirroring that goes on in this is just so powerful. So at the end of the film, we gets to a point where Sue has just taken and taken and taken, and there's no more spinal fluid for her to drain from Elizabeth to sustain herself, and she has to go into the switch, otherwise she'll die. So she does the switch back, and then we see it's really horrible, this scream that comes out of the bathroom where Elizabeth is basically completely fucking destroyed. Like she can be like, she's totally wrecked. She's got no hair. She's completely, everything's been taken. The balance has been so abused. And it's just like really interesting, this beastly, deformed kind of witchy version of her. And then she wants to destroy the version of Sue. So she calls up the substance hotline again and says like, I can't do this anymore. I need it to fucking stop. So she gets the termination injection delivered to her. By the way, I love the packaging. It's so clever. It's so fucking Amazon. It's so spiritually filthy. The consumerism of this whole film is just so well done, right? So she gets the termination fluid and decides she's going to jam the syringe into Sue and to terminate her because she can't go any further. And then she does it and then gets halfway and realizes, oh my God, I can't kill Sue because Sue is me. Sue is the hope of my future, of everything that I wanted. She's a part of me. And if I kill her, then I kill off the part of me that I wanted to be out there in the world because I can live through her. Yet again, looking at mortality, yet again, looking at this corruption of this inversion of herself. So halfway through, she stops and then does a blood transfusion to bring Sue back. It's crazy, right? Brings Sue back and then realizes that this wakes up Sue, and then Sue sees Elizabeth as someone who's trying to kill her, which is only natural. And the two of them both mirror each other at the start when they both see each other awake for the first time, and then they fight. And of course, Sue kills Elizabeth. Oh my God. And then if Sue kills Elizabeth, she has no one else to sustain herself from because she can't get the spinal fluid from her. So it's really fucked up when these two fight. And of course, there's a show. Sue's been asked to host this New Year's Eve live show on TV. She wants to go, and she's literally deteriorating. Like her ear falls off, like her fingernails are falling off. So she goes back, and this is one of the most interesting films. It's like the third act of the film where it just goes so unbelievably far that it's just like off the charts, body horror all the way. She takes what's left of the activation fluid from the star. And she's just so obsessed with trying to make a clone of herself. She injects it into herself as the clone. And of course, it's like, this is what happens when a clone makes another clone. off it's and of course all of the eyeballs inside of her head are all fighting for control, and it just goes horribly wrong. And then we get this third character that comes out. So we've gone from Elizabeth Demi Moore to Sue Margaret Qualley to now this final version of her, which is this monstro Eliza Sue, as it's shown in the credits, which which is this distorted, horrific monster that's got Demi Moore's face on its back, while it's got this whole, like, it's literally a tumor, right? I mean, it's very symbolic of like cells going into like a fucked up, state of just overbuilding on top of each other. So she turns herself to creates, births another version, which is the monster version, which coincidentally, brilliant chef's kiss to the director, is that this monster version of the two of these characters that are both the same person are now liberated in the monster. And so we get this montage of like monster Sue sticking like little earrings in the side of her ears and like dangling in front of the mirror and shit. And like twirling her hair like a little strain of hair on a fucking hair curler. When I was watching this, I was laughing so hard. Like, I have a very dark sense of humor anyway. So watching this movie and watching that scene, I was laughing so hard. I nearly spilt my coffee, right? Because Monster Sue wants to go to the show now, and it's the first time that she feels pretty because she's completely liberated from what other people would expect her to look at, and she's unapologetic about it. So she goes up to this symbolic print, like a photograph of the first character, rips off the face, sticks it with super glue on her face, and puts on the lipstick over the top of the poster of Demi Moore's face, and then says, in the montage, "Pretty girl should always smile," goes to the production, and of course is unbelievably attacked by everyone in the show. And it's like so visually overdone. Like, to be honest with you, the body horror of this and the biology of the composition that she's in is breaking down. And it's a little bit over the top, of course, like the blood scene. She gets up on stage in front of everyone, and now for the first time, she just wants to be loved. And it's me. She's like, it's me, it's Sue. Like how she talks, perfect monster makeup. And of course, they attack her. The crowd attacks her. Everyone screams. It's her special night. It all turns to shit. And basically, she is kind of deteriorating really quickly. A boob comes out of an eye socket. I'm not exaggerating. Go just see the film. Anyway, the ending is really, really powerful. It's kind of like a bookend of the start of the film, where it's like basically what happens is her body ends up breaking down. The monster version breaks down onto the Hollywood star, ends up on the star. It's kind of a tribute a little bit to Death Becomes Her, where they kind of end up, if you know that film where Goldie Hawn and Meryl Streep both end up like smashed up, broken and shit. It's kind of a little bit of a play on that, Hollywood grotesque. And of course, it's the star. It's so fitting. And she gets to be her star. She gets to go back to her star. And of course, it's like the next morning, the road sweeper, the cleaner, just sweeps over the top of the star. So well done. I mean, I feel like I've really talked about this film enough. I found it so interesting. A lot of the concepts are really, really, really strong. And I just think from like a spiritual point of view in today's world, this film is so socially relevant and so interesting. There are a lot of plays and references to symbology in the film, particularly at the start when we saw a fly drowning in whiskey in the glass at the table, where Elizabeth is meeting her producer, and it's kind of symbolic of how she feels inside of, in the glass, drowning, trapped. I would say probably a bit of a hat tip there in the director's seat to the movie, the iconic film The Fly. But yeah, it's really just like a person that is just, it's just not enough. Like they just don't love themselves. They haven't learnt self-love. And I think a big part of this message of this film is really about, you have to get to a point within yourself where enough is enough. Like you have to accept yourself as you are. And not doing this creates a monster within you that really consumes you and becomes very jealous and becomes hateful. And so that's really what it is. And it's just so good. The styling, the billboarding, the music of this film, obviously the switches, and of course, just the abuse of the balance. It's exactly what a human would do. It's exactly what humans do, to each other and themselves. They abuse themselves, they use each other. And it's kind of, a really interesting play on that. It made me think of the film, it made me think of the double, what are those like, double ups? What are they called? Oh shit. Fuck. Do you know? I don't know if anyone knows the word I mean. It's the one where it's like double ganger. That's the one. Yeah, double ganger. Yeah. It's like another version of you. This is something that's been explored a lot in film and television, but not quite the way that this has been done. So this film is disgusting. It's fantastic. It's really funny. It's really dark. It's got a very powerful message, and I think it's going to be an absolute cult classic for sure. I don't usually get on and talk about films, but I just felt compelled to talk about this one because I just found it so cool. So go check out the film The Substance. Let me know what you think of this film in the comments below. If you want me to do more movie reviews, I'm happy to do them. Otherwise, I'm going to be coming back and doing more of the original type of, stuff that I like to talk about on my channel. So anyway, lots of love to you. Hope you're having a really good week, and let me know what you think. I'd love to hear some thoughts a bit different to what I thought. What were your thoughts on this film? Okay, bye.